Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Sped Talks with me, your host Donna Steele. I know it's been a while, it's been weeks since I've put out any content. I was ill, unfortunately I caught COVID and it took a toll on me for a few weeks. But now I'm back and ready to bring you new special education related content. In today's episode, we are going to focus on executive functioning skills and what it is and those strategies that we as teachers as well as parents can use to help students who are struggling with those difficulties. So let's get to it. Strategies for working with children with executive functioning difficulties. When we talk about executive functioning skills, these are some of the things that we're talking about. These are things on this screen. These are things that students or anybody will need in order to function properly. So we're talking about impulse control, where one thinks before they act. 2, we're talking about emotional control, keeping feelings in check. 3, flexible thinking, where they're able to adjust behavior to unexpected changes. Throughout the school days, we often have, changes throughout the day that we didn't anticipate. And as such, students need to be able to be flexible as it relates to their behavior. Working memory, where they keep key information in mind while using it. Self-monitoring, that's the awareness, that's self-awareness to how one is doing in the moment. Planning and prioritizing, that is important in life, not just in school, to set and meet goals. Task initiation, where they take action to get started on a task without, a teacher having to prompt them or prod them to get it done. Organization, keeping track of things physically and mentally. Now, we know a lot of our students as educators struggle with these, and as such, like anything else, it has to be taught. Those executive functioning skills we must make to teach those. And we as educators, I know sometimes I'll hear my colleagues, why I have to teach this, how the student doesn't know how to do that. But again, in itself, it's a disability as well. It is like a learning disability or being, crippled in terms of your sight or your hearing. And as such, we have to teach it. What is executive functioning? When we talk about executive functioning, we hear this term, but really and truly, what is it? It's a set of mental skills that are coordinated in the brain's frontal lobe, the front part. Executive functioning work together to help a person achieve goals. So in order for a person to function as they should, all these different things that I named on the first slide need to come together to work together so that as individuals, we can achieve goals and we can be successful in life and, of course, in this case, school. We use executive functioning when we plan, organize, strategize, pay attention, and remember details. But again, some people, they have a deficit in the functioning of their brain, hence, we will have to teach these skills. Development of executive functioning skills. Executive functioning is slow to fully develop. So these students who struggle with it, theirs might be way more slower than the normal person. It emerges in late infancy, goes through marked changes during the ages of 2 through 6. So those who have children will notice, and does not peak until around age 25. You heard that? Age 25. So it's not fully developed until around 25. So think about that college student. Think about us when we were in college. We weren't necessarily fully organized. We eventually had to learn how to plan and realize that we had the mental capacity to do it. We had the potential to do it. So when we sit and we budget out or we manage our time. This is it coming together. Therefore, it is important for children to be provided with strategies and adult support in order to help them acquire these skills. And I find myself doing that with my daughter who is in college. Yeah, she's in college, and at times you'd say you're old enough, you should know how to do this. But when you really look at how the executive functioning skills develop, you realize that it won't peak. She won't peak. Hers won't peak until 25. So she will still need some guidance and will still need, some strategies to move her along so that she can be effective and efficient in life. Some of the difficulties when we talk about, those executive functioning difficulties, it includes planning. We have a lot of students who don't know how to plan. And I want to bring mention to those students who are autistic or has autism. That is one of their biggest issues. They're not, everything just seems so confusing to them. And what we see that they're not organized. We see that they're having difficulty planning, whether it's planning their writing or just planning their day, time management, working memory, initiating tasks. We have a lot of students who won't initiate, and as such, we as teachers, we have to prompt them without realizing maybe that something is off in their executive functioning. Difficulties can be seen at any age, but tend to be increasingly apparent during the elementary grades as the demands of work increase. And I don't think that is surprising to any of us that during the elementary age, where we're talking about that 6 to 11 years old period, that's when students these are babies really. They're not going to really know how to do any of this. And so it's essential that we as adults, teachers, parents, those role models in their lives, help them to plan better, help them to organize, have better time management, working memory, initiating tasks, so that when they get to that middle school, high school age, they're better at it. But again, remember, it won't peak until 25. So we can't expect, everything to be perfect. We have to give them some grace. How can executive functioning affect learning? This is big, because if those skills that I just highlighted, the planning, the time management, school is about planning. School is about, submitting assignments, being timely. So here are some ways that it may affect learning. They might have trouble initiating and completing tasks in a timely manner. They might have difficulty generating ideas. Think about a writing class where you have to come up with your own ideas. So independently, they might not be able to do that as how we would want them. They might have difficulty retaining information that is required to complete a task. They might have difficulty communicating details in an organized, sequential manner, whether orally and in writing. And again, I love to use the writing when it comes to executive functioning skills, because you give them a prompt to write about something. And when you read it, it's so much all over the place. You don't know what direction they're headed. And that is usually one indication that something might be off. It not necessarily might be executive functioning. It might be a language difficulty. And when we talk about a child can have executive functioning skills, and that be their only challenges, and that might be their only disability. Now, some disabilities, students struggle with executive functioning skills on top of what they already are challenged with. But this in itself can exist by itself, independently of any other disability, if that makes sense. Struggles to understand the planning that is needed to complete a project. We see this all the time as educators. But again, it's important that we teach them. Inhibition. This is the ability to stop one's own behavior at the appropriate time, including stopping actions and thoughts. So that impulse control, a lot of our students don't have it. And a person who struggle with executive functioning difficulty, you'll find that they just do based on how they feel. There is no restraint. Example, a child interrupting their parents when they're on the telephone or grabbing someone else's toy. No, we're not going to use one example, one time the child does it and say, oh, this child has executive functioning difficulties. No, it will be the pattern. It will be their MO all the time. So we're not talking one incident and then we automatically say this child has executive functioning difficulties. And again, this too will be diagnosed whether by a medical doctor or by a psychologist or somebody who is licensed to provide that relevant evaluation to determine that that's the diagnosis. Strategies for inhibition. The use of visual cues can be highly effective for this deficit area. Some examples may include a stop sign, a hand signal, pictures of quiet mouth, traffic light. A lot of our students with autism, they benefit from the visual cues because they also have those executive functioning difficulty. Use of a fidget, toy, or object. Some example may include a tangle, a Velcro, a squishy ball, therapy, putty, or Play-Doh. When a child begins to interrupt, ask them to write down their comments, their questions. In order for this strategy to be effective, make sure you give the child time to talk about what they have written. So like anything else, you're not just having them writing it down in vain. There's going to be some discussion surrounding it. They're going to explain their thought process as to why this happened or why it didn't happen the way we expected it to. Executive functioning, we're talking about shifting now. And when we talk about shifting, what does this mean? It's just the ability to move freely from one situation to another. In other words, to be flexible in order to respond appropriately to a situation. Some of us, we need that think time. We can't just think on our feet. And a lot of our students have a problem shifting, have a problem with adapting, have a problem being flexible. This is what they're suffering from, shifting. Your child does not want to stop playing their video games and begin their homework. So you find yourself saying it 1,000,001 times, and that is annoying. And in the classroom, the teacher doesn't have time to tell one child 10 the same things 10 times. It's annoying, right? Wouldn't you agree? So some children have that problem shifting, and this is where strategies come in to help that child. And a strategy might be provide warning as to when the transition will occur. A lot of times this again works wonders with our students with autism. So you will tell them in the next 5 minutes, I need you to clean up your toys and begin your homework. And you might use a timer for this, the use of visual timers. So a teacher might have it prompt on the board or a timer that goes off. This strategy provides a nonverbal warning and helps children understand the concept of time. Schedules can be used as well to prepare your child for the series of activities they need to complete while at home. So another effective strategy might be a visual strategy that you put on the wall, a visual schedule rather that you put on the wall with times attached to it and what needs to be done. Based on your child's developmental level and ability, you might use one with pictures. So if it's a smaller child, you might use pictures showing the action that you want them to do at a particular time. So they're able to shift when you want them to. Again, it's not going to happen in a day. The strategy will have to be consistent and be done over time. Initiation. The ability to begin a task or activity and to independently generate ideas, responses, or problem-solving strategies. A lot of us struggle with taking the initiative, even as adults. So just imagine elementary age students, not knowing what's going to happen and if they're going to be teased if they raise their hand first to answer questions. Now, we have students who naturally does that, but not everybody will. So you tell your child to begin their homework, and when you check in 5 minutes later, no work has been completed. This is a challenge for many of us in the classroom where we have students who have a problem initiating, and they require that prompting from an adult or somebody in authority to get the work done. A strategy might be provide adult assistance with the first item to ensure the child understands the task demands. And teachers do this a lot. This is where the teacher does the modeling and then have the child do the activity based on what was modeled. For writing tasks, the use of graphic organizers may be helpful in formulating their ideas. Yes, some people have a challenge, that writer's block that when we are in college, we suffer from. We don't know how to initiate the first sentence. This is where a graphic organizer may come in handy for school-age children in order to help them to formulate their ideas, as well as sentence starters might also be very effective to get the writing going. Initially, you might want to have a brief discussion with your child in order to brainstorm ideas, to say, well, we're going to talk about at the beach today. Tell me some things that people do at the beach, for example. And you might just kind of have them tell you and you list it out, or have them list it out. That will get the brain wanting to go. So these responses before your child begins to work independently is key to providing that comfort for them to possibly want to work. It doesn't work all the time, but children, it provides them a comfort level, especially if it's something that they struggle with, coming up with their own ideas. Provide incentives when asking your child to engage in non-preferred activities. So, for example, they might not initiate because they don't want to do it or they don't like this activity. This is where you, as the parent or the adult in charge, provide them with a little incentive. I'll give you 5 minutes more of TV time if you do this. I will take you to the park if you do that. And it might seem as bribery, but again, children, will work for what they want. And some of these incentives doesn't have to cost you a thing, Sometimes a mere little sticker does the trick. You put a sticker on the child's hand and that makes them happy. And at the end of the day, you're happy because they get the job done. Kind of like how adults, we won't work unless we're paid. Think of it that way. Your working memory. This is a big one. This is a big one because several things could cause your working memory to be challenged. And it's the capacity, when we talk about working memory, we're talking about the capacity to hold information in your mind for the purpose of completing a task. For example, when you ask your child to complete multi-step directions, example, brush your teeth, get dressed, and come downstairs for breakfast, the child might do one of the three that you've asked him or her to do. So some people naturally struggle with their working memory. And how do we mitigate against this? You want to repeat orally presented information. So you might say it and you think they get it, but not so much. They might do one of the two or, 3 of the 5. So you want to say it over for the sake of giving them the benefit of doing what you want them to do. Begin with giving them the benefit of having heard you. So you want to keep repeating. After a while, of course, nobody wants to keep repeating, but for school-age children, it is imperative, especially if they struggle with their working memory. Simplify the language in direction. So you want to be as simple as possible and not to be too complicated. Break down the multi-step direction. So if you have several things that you want them to do, you break it down. They complete the first one, you tell them what you want them to do next, rather than giving them 4 different steps and expect it to be done all at once. Use mnemonics or other strategies to help remember a series or other information. So I remember when I was in high school and we were learning about the planets, there was a popular mnemonic that our teacher taught us, and that was so easy for us rather than you trying to remember all the planets. So that was a way, even in exams, we would recite that mnemonic and know the order of the planets. So you want to use that, and there are several mnemonics in math. The teachers, you know what I'm talking about. Parents, those creative parents, you can make up your own little mnemonics, but it's mostly used in schools. Use visualization strategies to enhance recall. Planning and organizing or organization. This is the ability to manage current and future-oriented task demands. Also includes the ability to impose order on work, play, and storage spaces. And an example I have here, you're bringing your child to football practice and ask them to gather all of their necessary materials before it is time to leave. So kind of like your homework. We know we'll have school tomorrow. So one of the biggest challenges that I find that parents have is that planning and organizing the day before you come to school. So you wouldn't leave your homework if you packed your bag from the night, if you put out certain things that you will need from the night, so that when you get to school, it's there. So naturally, you want to get your children in the habit of planning and making sure you're organized, making sure you have what you need for school. Not when you get to school, you don't have it. We don't want to have that. That is a no-no. We don't want to have that. So you want to start to teach them, these school-age children, mostly those starting at the elementary, or even before that, how to plan, how to organize, how to anticipate what we're going to do tomorrow, how to anticipate the weeks from now. So if you have an assignment that's due, we need to start working, especially if we don't know the content. How are we going to organize the information? How are we going to plan for a trip that we might be going on? Include them in these little things to get that part going, in terms of, it no longer being so much of a deficit. And I mentioned some of this, but here are the strategies. The use of checklists is highly effective in increasing organizational skills. So you want to have your little checklist, and you're kind of like when you're going to the supermarket or the store, and you have your shopping list and you check off as you go. Same thing. The use of a calendar for upcoming activities and or assignments. Color coding books, folders by subject area. That is one way of being organized. Break down long-term assignments into smaller components and set deadlines accordingly. Design a quiet and clean space for your child to complete their own homework or other tasks. Just some strategies. Self-monitoring. This is big too. This is the ability to monitor one's own performance and to measure it against some standard of what is needed or expected. This is where we're pretty much checking ourselves. Example, you ask your child to complete their math assignment and then check it for accuracy. Simply put. And some strategies, the use of a calculator can be used to ensure accuracy of math assignments. So after you've done your math assignment without a calculator, you probably want to double check to make sure, your answers are correct. The use of a checklist to explicitly denote all steps necessary to complete the task. So you know what you need to be done, but after you've done it, you have your checklist that you go through. This was done, that was done, and that is you. That is you self-monitoring what you did. Creating checkpoints to ensure comprehension of presented material. When you get to number 5, check in with me. That is also a good way. So something that works with me and my 6-year-old, when she does her homework, I'll say, you do the first 2 problems. When you're done, come back to me so I can check, and then you keep going after that. That is one way to start to teach these elementary or primary age students how to self-monitor. The use of visuals, example, red, green, to indicate whether your child fully understands or needs assistance. And and that concludes our presentation. A lot of this information can be found at the National Center for Learning Disabilities here in the US, and it's in books. A very good guide that I went through was Late, Lost, and Unprepared, a parent's guide to helping children with executive functioning. I found that to be a very good book that you can utilize. And as I said before, a lot is on the internet about this. We don't really talk about it when a child isn't organized, when a child isn't prepared. These are not things that we talk about that much, but we have to teach them if they're going to be successful within the classroom, especially students who struggle with other disabilities. For example, students with attention deficit. It's very common with them, as well as students with autism, where they're battling not just not just other characteristics that are associated with attention deficit or autism, but they're also battling with this main deficit or difficulty rather of executive functioning. And as such, as teachers, wherever possible, we want to teach them, because we want to make sure at the end of it, we're putting out students who are going to be productive in society. And so we have to help them, not just special needs students, but students in our average day-to-day general education classroom struggle with executive functioning. I mean, some adults struggle with it. Remember, it doesn't peak until 25. So that concludes today's presentation.
So there you have it. All you need to know about executive functioning skills, what it is, those challenges that our students might experience, and how to mitigate against those difficulties. As usual, if you have questions, comments, feel free to use the DMs to send me those, and I will sure to respond accordingly, and hopefully in a timely manner. It's so good to be back. Until next time, this is Donna Steele saying goodbye. Thank you.